The sort of questions are, why is an organization of individuals, as the RSS has referred to itself as, or a group of individuals, I beg your pardon, why is this group of individuals lobbying the United States
Yeah.
Congress?
Donald Trump wins the election in November 2024. Just few days before that, RSS registers itself under the Lobbying Disclosure Act.
This right wing think tank based in DC funding a Washington Post columnist trip all the way to India to report on to write about what's happening with the RSS. Now we don't know why Hudson Institute did this. We don't know if Hudson Institute was paid by someone else to do this.
This process of trying to get the validation of certain groups across the world at a world stage is the process of also doubling down on your hatred, right? It's the process of so that you can do more.
The most sort of concerning in this rise of the right and this naked sort of display of their politics is, like you're saying, that maybe the mask can come off, maybe the hood can come off, but even as that hood comes off, you still want to be saying that you're justified in doing that. You still want to be saying, no, 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 I'm actually the victim. I'm the one who's having to do this in self defense.
Salam, Namaste, Zindabad, friends. This is Harsh Mander. I'm back for one more episode of Ye Daag Daag Ujala, a series of long-form discussions about the state of our republic that Karwan-e Mohabbat is doing with Scroll. Today we are gathered, in the context of a very important report that two young journalists based in the United States have brought out. And let me introduce them first. I'm happy to introduce Meghnad Bose, who's an award-winning investigative journalist. He's based in the US. He's a professor of journalism at the University of Memphis. He heads the MA program in Open Source Investigative Reporting. And just before we started this discussion, Meghnad mentioned that on the wall behind me is a picture of Martin Luther King, and Memphis is where he was assassinated. I think it sort of, in a strange way, underlines the context of what we are setting out to discuss. And our second guest is Biplob Kumar. He's originally from Assam and did his master's in journalism from Columbia, which is one of the best institutions for the study of journalism, and is now an independent journalist based in the United States. So welcome to both of you. So Meghnad, Biplop, the context of this discussion is a report that you just very recently published after many months of very careful investigation for an independent newsroom, Prism, based in the United States. According to this report, the RSS, the Rashtriya Swayamsevak Sangh, has spent something close to $330,000 over the last 3 quarters for lobbying in the United States. This is an extraordinary piece of news in many different ways. But before our readers, our listeners can understand what you have reported and why it is so important, maybe let me ask both Meghnad and Biplop to explain to an Indian audience, for instance, what is lobbying at all? Why do people pay money for lobbying in the United States? And and then perhaps a little bit about what you found and why you think this is such an important story. So first, Meghnad. Mhm.
Sure. Thank you so much, sir, for having us on your show. We followed it. We've seen your work, obviously, over the years, and have admired it. And thank you for having us today on your show. And I just want to say before starting, you mentioned Dr. King. On the wall behind you, there's a museum at the site he got assassinated in Memphis. And that museum pays rich tributes to Mahatma Gandhi because Dr. King was inspired by Mohandas Gandhi. And it's interesting because what we're discussing today is the RSS, a member of the group that eventually went on to assassinate Mahatma Gandhi in India. So that through line between where you are and where I am and where we are here in the United States, and the theme of what we're discussing is also interesting. But to answer your question, lobbying, yeah.
Meghnad, just let me sort of interrupt, taking up the cue briefly from what you just said. It is 100 years of the RSS, and I thought its influence on India's political, public, social life is so massive today. I think we need to understand the nature of this organization much better, and I think uh, what what you have uncovered also will contribute to that. So I have undertaken a series with Himal South Asian, a series of conversations about the RSS, and the first was with Rajmohan Gandhi, Mahatma Gandhi's grandson. And I asked him, why did Nathuram Godse assassinate Mahatma Gandhi? And what explains the hatred, the visceral hatred of the RSS for Mahatma Gandhi? Because in my research, I found that their number one enemy is India's Muslims. The number two enemy is Mahatma Gandhi. And I wanted to understand what this organization really stands for. Why is this hatred for Mahatma Gandhi? And he said two things very simply, in the way that Gandhiji often explained things. He said two reasons. One is that Gandhiji said India belongs equally to all people of all faiths and all castes and all identities. That's it. That's number one. Whereas the RSS believes that India is a Hindu nation in which Muslims and Christians should only have second-class citizenship. And the second thing that they hate him for is because he said Ishwar and Allah are the same. So yeah, so I just thought, Dr. King and Gandhiji and the RSS, yeah, we're trying to make sense of them. Over to you, Meghnad.
Yeah, no, I mean, we're looking at 100 years of history, and we're looking at some of the things that we're saying, which we found are unprecedented in the RSS's history. But to really make sense of it, we do have to look at that history to say, yes, this may be the first time, but what are the parallels in history in how the Hindu far right or the Hindutva far right movement has attempted to do this over the years. But to answer your question on lobbying, especially for South Asian audiences who may be joining, who may be unacquainted with this term, it's essentially a practice in which you pay people who are professional lobbyists who then go to lawmakers and members of the government and say, this is what this group represents, this is what they do, these are the kind of things that they're trying to push for. But basically, they don't always say it directly. They try to make a case for either a policy position that you're pushing, or a law that you want implemented, or something you want changed in the law, or certain favorable treatment you might want in favor of one group or against another group. basically, if the field of war has mercenaries who engage in battle for a dime, for the highest bidder or for the group that pays them the best, lobbyists are essentially the ones who do that in the field of politics, in the field of influence, right? And they get paid to do this. This is over above the board, and it's official. It's legal in the United States to do this, and there are certain regulations that come with it. And as we discuss the story, we'll explain how the lobbyists who are doing this work for the Rashtriya Swayamsevak Sangh or the RSS have actually violated some of the basic requirements, some of the basic legal requirements, such as by not even listing the RSS as a foreign entity, such as by experts, which experts have called into question. Another point is that experts have called into question why the RSS's lobbyists have not registered under the Foreign Agents Registration Act, because they said that what they're working on behalf of the RSS is US India bilateral relations. So there are some of these questions which I'm sure we'll get into in more detail, but
Yeah.
in essence, that is what lobbying in the United States looks like.
Just to understand it better for South Asian audiences, uh, what is the equivalent, if anything, of lobbying in say India? Biplop, would you like to try that difficult one?
Yeah, sure. I can try for sure, and feel free to interject, Meghnad, if you have any inputs. I feel like so. What we understand lobbying, and I hope my internet is stable because there's some unstable thing here written on this. I hope I'm. Yeah, just let me know if this goes off. But yeah, uh, lobbying essentially, as Meghnad mentioned, it's a paid, act where there are professionals who go to, politicians to, represent certain interests and sort of pay money. And they are paid by interest groups. These professional lobbyists are paid. In India, I would say equivalent of that. Uh, there is no professional lobbying corporations as such that exist in India, as we know, see in the United States. But I would say that there are interest groups that exist. Like, there are like, big corporate associations, like, business associations that exist and sort of, uh, sort of create, they have like a bonhomie with certain politicians that they want to support, who they want to, get elected. Let's say in Bombay, they want, in a certain constituency, so let's say in some Bandra constituency in Bombay, they want a very specific candidate to win because there might be a specific, real estate project that they want to succeed in Bombay, right? Or in that area in Bandra. So, that could be like a lobbying equivalent, although it is not known as lobbying in India, but it happens in similar nature in terms of transactions happening and in terms of how much influence is being wielded by certain interest groups, be it business groups or be it any other cultural groups or ideological groups that exist or civil society groups that exist, and groups which have certain amount of capital or certain amount of resources to afford it, they do it. And it might not have happened at a professional scale, but it happens. Yeah. Sorry, Meghnad, you were going to add.
Yeah, no, so that's great. So it's a kind of backroom engagement with people who hold political power, mostly in the state or around it. And it can be,
Yeah.
it can be like in India, we see big business, of course, is a major influencer. I mean, there's almost what we can see a kind of elite capture of policy making. But there are also religious groups, there are caste groups, there are ethnic groups, there are livelihood groups which could be engaging with the state. Uh, in a democracy, it's legitimate to engage with the state, but a lot of lobbying especially by powerful people, might engage even trying to influence them in ways that are not strictly legal. So isn't the lobbying that is formalized in the United States, in a sense, giving a legal cover to many ways of influence, some of which are not ethical, and probably not legal. Is that a good understanding of lobbying in the United States?
Yes, that's a good understanding, but basically there are different perspectives to look at it, right? It's the classic sort of glass half full, glass empty sort of approach, right? One could say that, okay, lobbying is inherently sort of problematic. You have big moneyed interests who can obviously spend more, who then get greater access to these politicians and lawmakers and the federal government and whatnot. But one can also say that, wait, you do have lobbying by these same big business interests in a country like India. It's just that in a country like the United States, where there are lobbying laws that exist, there's a track of that. There's a record of that. There are
Right.
disclosures that are made about it. Those disclosures, by the way, have to be made public. So we spoke about the Foreign Agents Registration Act. The Foreign Agents Registration Act requires each registrant, which is a foreign agent, which is a company or a group or a lobbying firm or an individual working on behalf of a foreign principal. It could be a foreign government, it could be a foreign group. They have to mention each and every meeting they had with a lawmaker, what the subject of that meeting was, what are the emails or communications they sent out to people. If they contact a journalist with a press release, what was in that press release, which journalist did they send it to. All these details are actually published. They're first filed as disclosures to the government, and then they're published. So one would argue that having these laws actually enables a kind of transparency, which then journalists like Biplop and myself and countless others can look at and study and go like, okay, what's happening here? Wait a minute, that's the RSS. They're lobbying US lawmakers for the first time in their history, which we wouldn't have found out had those laws and those disclosure requirements not existed.
That's very well taken. That by at least legalizing a process that happens in every country, more so in a democracy, but I'm sure also in authoritarian regimes. By legalizing the process, you're at least bringing an element of transparency into it. So let me just leap straight, now that we understand what lobbying is, let me, leap straight into the question of why would the RSS want to lobby with lawmakers and the executive in the United States. Now, what is it that they say there? What is it that they claim is motivating this? And what has your research led you to speculate and be free to speculate here, because we need to understand an organization which by choice has remained very shadowy. It is not registered in India still after 100 years, despite all the influence it has. And so we're trying to shed light uh, on the working of an organization which is not transparent, to put it lightly. So I think speculation in this regard is legitimate. And so let me understand from you, what has your research revealed to you about why the RSS is lobbying the United States lawmakers and the state there, and what is your speculation about what is motivating them?
Yeah, maybe I
Maybe.
can answer with the factual basis first, and then Biplop, maybe you can take a jab at the inferences, and then I can butt in with some of mine as well.
Sure, sure.
The Yeah, to start with, let's talk facts, right? So what do we know for sure? We know that this large lobbying firm, Squire Patton Boggs, one of the largest lobbying firms in the United States, filed a lobbying registration and subsequent quarterly reports, one every 3 months, listing how much money they're getting, what they're getting that money for. So, who was their client? Was their client the RSS directly? No. Their client was another lobbying firm called One Plus Strategies, right? Now, the Squire Patton Boggs had its client listed as One Plus Strategies. OnePlus Strategies was listed as working on behalf of the Rashtriya Swayamsevak Sangh. And now this
What is
is very clearly spelled out.
what is this one plus? I mean, is
One
it
OnePlus Strategies is another lobbying firm based in Pennsylvania in the United States. So you have lobbying firm A, which is Squire Patton Boggs, which is the registrant in these disclosures. It says that its client is this other lobbying firm B, called OnePlus Strategies. Lobbying firm B is listed as working on behalf of Rashtriya Swayamsevak Sangh. Very clearly written in the official documents submitted to the government and published by the US Congress. Right? And by the way, for readers unacquainted, the U.S. Congress has nothing to do with the Indian National Congress. It's their the House and the Senate combined, which is referred to as the U.S. Congress. Right. So now coming to the facts, what do they say in these disclosures? In the registration, which was filed on 16 January 2025, the registration says that the general lobbying area is foreign relations. And the specific lobbying issue, current and anticipated, is, hold your breath for this one, is US India bilateral relations. Now,
so?
these, this is
What has the RSS got to do with it? How can it claim to have any engagement with this issue?
absolutely. Now, and like I said this somewhere else, that if you're talking about the relations between, say, the US Cricket Board and the BCCI, you wouldn't call it US India bilateral relations. US India bilateral relations, by the virtue of the term, means the relations between the two countries, right?
Right.
And this is what was the topic listed officially as the RSS's specific lobbying issue. Now, in subsequent quarterly reports, the specific lobbying issue was written as introducing the RSS to US lawmakers, to US officials, right? And these are officials in the Senate, in the US Senate, and the US House of Representatives, the two sort of parts of their bicameral
That's it.
legislature.
That's probably a more honest uh, sort of enunciation of what they were trying to do, introducing the
I mean,
RSS.
it's difficult to say, right? Because I mean, what's to say that one is more honest than the other when they've literally come out and said that what they're lobbying for is US-India bilateral relations. Now, here's the important part, and which is why I'm not even speculating here. I'm just pointing out the facts. When we spoke to multiple experts on foreign influence operations in the United States, multiple experts who studied lobbying for years and years, what they told us is that look, if there's this group whose specific lobbying issue is US India bilateral relations, and this group has deep links with the government, which they do with the RSS has deep links with the BJP. The BJP is currently in power. The current prime minister is a former RSS leader. Several ministers in his government are former and current RSS members. And so that's sort of a point of record that's established. But more importantly, they mentioned that their specific lobbying issue is US India bilateral relations. These experts told us that given these details, the RSS's lobbyists have registered under the Foreign Agents Registration Act, because then this is clearly they're talking about US India bilateral relations. They should have registered under the more stringent Foreign Agents Registration Act, or FARA, because then we would have been able to find out more details about what the RSS was specifically lobbying about. Which officials were they meeting? Which lawmakers were they meeting? What were those meetings about? What information were they sending journalists? What information were they putting out into the congressional ether, so to speak? Those are things we did not find out because the RSS's lobbyists did not file their registrations under the Foreign Agents Registration Act, which every expert we said to found to be a problem. Biplop, if you want to add?
Yeah, and here I think I can also add to their own intentions, right? And also we could the speculation bit of it. But before we go into speculation, there is one more very critical finding from the facts that we have found from our reporting,
Right.
which is about in the within the registration also, uh, which is the registration under the Lobbying Disclosure Act, which, as Meghnad mentioned, was the relatively less stringent act under which they have registered, under which Square Patent Box OnePlus has registered itself and added OnePlus Strategies and RSS as who they're working for as their clients. Even within this registration form, when we like look through it, we scan through it, on point 14, there is a question about whether whether there is any foreign entity involved. And when we say foreign entity, they clearly stated like listing foreign entities which has at least 20% equitable ownership in the client or any organization identified, directly or indirectly is involved or manages, finances of the or subsidizes activities of the client, or is an affiliate of the client or any organization that has a direct interest in the outcome of the lobbying activity. So that is RSS. All these identify towards RSS is the ultimate client, as like we have found in the registration. And is that entity then a foreign entity or not? Is the question that the registration form asks. Square Patent Box has clearly clicked no. There is a tick mark next to the no option. And this was on January 16th when they had filed this. This was in January when they had filed this registration form.
Just to
And
stop you right here, I mean, when you say RSS is not a foreign entity in the United States, are they claiming it's an American entity?
so
I mean, essentially,
that's a
yes.
very important.
Essentially,
So
yeah.
yeah. So that is a very interesting,
There-
question because
there are branches of the RSS, I guess, which are American entities, but the RSS, wow.
there are
Anyway,
branches. There is the Hindu Swayamsevak Sangh, which has is a registered non-profit in the United States, but they are not mentioned. They could have mentioned any of those organizations, but Rashtriya Swayamsevak Sangh in those many words has been mentioned. And interestingly, today when the Prachar Pramukh, Akhil Bharatiya Prachar Pramukh of RSS, his name is Sunil Ambekar, when he went out and tweeted, he said that the RSS works only in Bharat and it has not engaged with lobbying firms in the US. And by saying that, he's also saying that RSS is a foreign entity. When it comes to the US, it's a foreign entity, right? So but in the registration form which we found, and this is the official government registration form in the, if you go to lda.senate.government.gov, you will find these details. So they have written no, that they are not a foreign entity when it comes to the United States. So these are the facts that we have found. What Meghnad first mentioned, and what yeah.
let's get to the speculations just immediately after this, but I'm just finding this quite fascinating. Uh, I find that far right organizations, parties around the world uh, tend to have very little relationship with the truth. They get themselves tied up in, but this is so brazenly uh, a falsehood. I just wonder how they thought they'd just get away with it. Yeah.
I'll give you, they could have egg on their face if at any point of time the US Congress or the federal government decides to take action. The US Congress could take action by saying, look, you've clearly violated the lobbying requirements under this law, and therefore we could fine you $200,000. The US Department of Justice, which is the federal government, which is the Trump administration, could take action potentially against the RSS by saying, if they find them to have required to file under FARA, if they required the RSS lobbyists to file under FARA and they didn't, that could also become an issue of investigation. So by creating this sort of, by running this congressional influence campaign in this shadowy manner without the proper factual disclosures that were required, you're essentially opening yourselves up for a lot of trouble. And in India, you might get away by doing that. I mean, you could get away by doing that in the US as well, but in India, you might get away by doing that by not being a registered organization for 100 years, by saying things like, we were banned and now we're not, and therefore obviously we exist, or even by saying that Hinduism isn't registered either. I mean, that's a preposterous thing to say. Imagine if someone were opening a startup and they said, I'm not going to register my startup under company laws in India because Hinduism isn't registered either. I mean, you would like put that person in jail probably, right? Or at least like have like civil penalties or whatever issued against that person. So when you talk about the specious relationship with the truth, the point here is you're literally playing with regulatory fire by risking the ire of these American institutions at any moment that they might choose to. And for what reason? I mean, you could have literally written that the RSS is a foreign entity, or you could have registered under FARA and you were doing this. I mean, we found out about the RSS activities anyway, right? So one sort of wonders if the RSS has been so used to getting around the sort of legal framework in India, the regulatory framework in India, that whether their lobbyists might have thought or been instructed to, we don't know, and that's the speculation you were looking for, that they might get away with it in the US too.
So I think this last thing that you had said does seem plausible to me, that they have a record of bypassing law and being held accountable for their statements, whether they're true or false, in a way that has become almost, they've got so used to it that perhaps they believed that they could get away with that also in the United States. But I think, that's of interest. But really, I'm trying to understand uh, why are they doing this? And partly speculation, partly from your research. I
Yeah.
A, could they really be interested in trying to lobby around India and US relations? Uh, you know, uh, as they claim. Firstly, why should they be doing? What is their locus standi to do it? Is of course a big question. Uh, but we know that uh, the in I mean, the ideological lodestar of the BJP is the RSS. It is avowedly so. Uh, the Prime Minister, people holding the highest, constitutional positions in this country, most of them are closely associated with the RSS, and ministers as well. Even so, it does not give them any kind of locus standi to mediate or to influence about US-India relations. So, uh, but India-US relations at the time that we speak is going through probably its most difficult hour for many decades. I mean, uh, so. Uh, So just staying with speculation and understanding, do you think they were really lobbying about India-US relations? Do you think that was a motivation, or was that just a cover for what was the real motivation, which they also have mentioned is to educate or inform lawmakers in the United States about what the RSS is?
There are two
Yeah.
sort of likely motivations here, right? And let's address both of them. I mean, the two elephants in the room, right? One is the RSS in India has achieved a mainstreamized legitimacy over the past decade that it might not have dreamed of in the first 9 decades of its existence, right? The top echelons of central leadership, and many states too, but of central leadership, are openly sort of uh, subservient to the RSS in ways, or if not subservient might sound too harsh. They are openly affiliated with the RSS, the top echelons of central leadership, at least.
I
Um,
don't I
and
don't think I don't think subservient is overstating it. I mean, there is clearly a hierarchy, and the RSS is the boss in its relationship with the BJP. The BJP is occasionally seeming to rebel a little bit, but overall, but also the selection of chief ministers of many states are people who actually have no administrative experience in government. Their only qualification is long years in the RSS. So yes, back
and
to you.
and so the yeah and so they've achieved this mainstream legitimacy over the past decade, which I mean, which in 2025, when they hit 100 years, they're really at the pinnacle of their mainstream prowess, so to speak, right? But you look at the Western media, the coverage of the RSS. You look at how British media covers it, or you look at how American media covers it, and you'll see a stark difference that hasn't changed all that much. Pre 2014, post 2014, 2025 versus, say, 2005, right? Still a lot of the foreign media coverage that the RSS gets will refer to it as a paramilitary group, as a fascist paramilitary group, as a Hindu right wing or a Hindu far right organization whose earliest leaders were inspired by fascist leaders of the 1930s of Italy and Germany, Hitler and Mussolini. And you
And also as a
look
Hindu
at
supremacist organization, I think that is one more.
as a Hindu supremacist, Hindutva supremacist organization. All of those things, as an organization with deep sort of anti-Muslim roots and even their current sort of anti-Muslim politics and policies that they sort of engage in. That has been the striking description of the RSS that has continued to be in foreign media, right? And one of the ways to sort of potentially alter that is to conduct an influence operation, not just looking at lawmakers, but also looking at media persons. And what else did our investigation find? Our investigation found that there were, in June, a couple of the three of the people who were lobbying, working with the RSS on lobbying operations, two of them at Squire Patton Boggs, one at OnePlus Strategies. Three of these people came to Nagpur for an RSS event in June. Accompanying them on that same foreign delegation were two members of a think tank, of a right wing think tank based in Washington, D.C., called the Hudson Institute. Now, one of them writes a column on Wall Street Journal. Another one is a think tank specialist, works a lot on US India stuff. A Washington Post columnist trip to Nagpur in India to attend the 100-year centenary celebration of the RSS. This right wing think tank based in DC funding a Washington Post columnist trip all the way to India to report on, to write about what's happening with the RSS, right? Now, so we understand that these efforts that have been taking place. Now, we don't know why Hudson Institute did this. We don't know if Hudson Institute was paid by someone else to do this, right? Whether Hudson Institute was part of this larger influence operation. But it is striking and it is pretty odd that a conservative think tank in Washington would spend its dollars sending sending a Washington Post columnist to fly all the way to India to cover an event. And so we can see that as part of this large influence operation that seems to be taking place, part of which is lobbying lawmakers, but other parts which seem to be about getting journalists and commentators to write things, to meet with RSS members, to come to RSS events, to be presented an image of the RSS that the RSS finds to be amenable and favorable to itself. That could be part of a program to improve the RSS's image in the eyes of the people it's targeting, which is US lawmakers and US reporters or US commentators, right? US think tanks, right? So that one is a sort of pretty straightforward view that this could be one of the core motivations for this lobbying effort or for this larger influence operation. The second one is the trickier one. The second one is the bit where they said about US-India bilateral relations. I want to talk to you about this group, which you probably would have heard of, some of your readers would have heard of as well. It's the American Israel Public Affairs Committee, better known as AIPAC, right? Now, AIPAC is a group that is staunchly pro-Israel, has deep links with the Israeli administrations, Israeli government, but is not registered under the Foreign Agents Registration Act, and routinely promotes Israel's view in Washington, right? And it has repeatedly come under fire, but it is known to be one of the most powerful sort of lobbying groups, the pro-Israel lobby in DC, that even as they committed a genocide in Gaza, they managed to lobby their way through that crisis pretty effectively to their ends in DC. Now, AIPAC can do certain things without registering under FARA, without having to mention details of who it's meeting, what kind of meetings they're having, which officials they're speaking to, which officials they're targeting more than others, which newsrooms they're reaching out to, which reporters they're sending their press releases and informational materials to, what those information materials are. AIPAC doesn't need to disclose all of that, a lot of those details, because it's not registered under FARA. So there is a benefit to the Israeli government for AIPAC to not register under FARA. Similarly, and I speculate here, I'm not saying that this is what's happening. I'm saying it is a potential benefit and a potential problem of the RSS not registering under FARA while saying it's working on US India bilateral relations, because this could present a benefit to the government of India if the RSS can do certain things in its lobbying operations without disclosing them because they're not registered under FARA. I'm not saying that's happening, but the way in which they've carried out their disclosures presents the possibility for them to do that. And it's happened with other countries such as Israel, like I mentioned in the past, and it is entirely possible that it could be happening with India. By the way, we did send out questions to the government of India requesting responses on specific questions like this one, that have you been engaging with the RSS in this effort, and we haven't heard back from them.
So Meghnad, the second about trying to influence India US relations, and more than that, trying to influence it in the context of the kind of public policies in relation to matters like Israel and Gaza that the present government has undertaken. That appears to be possibly, as you say, something that might be going on, but we have no clear evidence of it. But what we clearly do have evidence of, from what you're saying, is the attempt to influence the image of the RSS, to clean up, if you like, the image of the RSS in the US and in the global north. Clean up obviously is metaphor that I use coming from the left. So I mean, you might, if you come from the far right, you don't want to clean up. You might want to further sort of advance a certain kind of image. But the fact that the RSS is still perceived to be, as you say, by and large, a paramilitary, anti-Muslim, anti-minority, Hindu supremacist formation, is still the prevailing opinion or image, which is what they would probably perhaps want to change. But the irony is that this is happening at a time where in India, 2014, when Mr. Modi first came to power, there were significant and influential segments of liberal political opinion, which did not link up Mr. Modi to his RSS past or even his record in Gujarat. And they said, no, it's all for positive change, etc. But I think by the time we reached 2019, all masks were thrown to the, and in the second term, quite openly, the government was actually pursuing. There were three things that the government had said. One was Kashmir's special status should go. A temple should be built at the site of the Babri Masjid, where The mob demolished the medieval mosque, and there should be, a uniform civil code. And it has advanced in all of these. It has also, the whole question of citizenship has suddenly been weaponized against Muslims in multiple ways, and that still continues, and so on. And the hate attacks, lynching on Muslims has reached really epidemic kind of levels, and attacks on places of worship, attacks on, and so on and so forth. So, at a time when the RSS's ideology, and the BJP sort of advancing that ideology is so open, uh, for the RSS to then want to change that image in the West through a process of lobbying. Uh, is that what is happening? And let me just complicate that question a even further. Uh, there's no doubt that the RSS has a history of admiration for Nazi Germany and for Hitler in particular. And the irony of, and they said that, we should learn and solve the Muslim problem in the way that Hitler solved the Jewish problem, etc., etc. That is, undeniable. But to see a world in which India's sort of closest ally, uh, probably in the world, is Israel, and to do that in a history of support for Nazi. How are you going to? How do you? Uh, you are, with tribalism in India, different age, to emerge in the rest of the world. Is that what this lobbying is about?
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I can go ahead. Like, Meghnad, Washington Post, and by the way, Jim Garak is himself writes for conservative at the conservative magazine National Review, and he wrote in his Washington Post column that my trip was sponsored by the Hudson Institute, which Meghnad talked about, and the Foundation for India and Indian Diaspora Studies, whose president is affiliated with the RSS. So there was a RSS connection and clear RSS connection in his visit to India at the centenary celebrations in October. Now, to the point of remaking RSS's image, right, that you sort of posed and you asked about. Jim Garrity, if you read his column, he mentions this stuff, but if you properly read his column, Jim Garrity is not without his own critics of the RSS too. Like this is a guy, this is a conservative American guy who was paid by RSS affiliates and conservative has happened. RSS registering in 2025 is it's a critical moment in history too. Donald Trump wins the election in November 2024. Donald Trump swears in January 20th, 2025. Just few days before that, RSS registers itself under the Lobbying Disclosure Act, which we found. In February, a month after the after Donald Trump becomes president for the second time in the United States, Pam Bondi, the Attorney General of the United States, the foremost lawyer of the United States, she goes out and says that FARA, which is the Foreign Agents Registration Act, which regulates basically, regulates or supervises or looks into investigates foreign influence, that will be pared back. They are going to be really conservative about how they implement that piece of law, with that piece of legislation. And they also removed the foreign a task force under the FBI in the US, which was responsible to sort of investigate foreign influence. So this timing is incredibly important, and we have spoken to a lot of experts in our journalism as well. And all the experts have said that this is a moment where perhaps there is a very transactional form of administration in power in the United States. And people around the world have understood that. Like we see that, a Qatari government gifted a big plane to Donald Trump. There are various gifts flying across from various parts of the world to the president of the United States. And at the similar moment, perhaps we could speculate that RSS also sees an opportunity to finally be able to make amends of their image in the eye of the world, or in the eye of the most powerful nation in the world. Now, the second part of what you raised about US India bilateral relation. Yeah, sorry, go ahead. Yeah.
But look, I think that somewhat explains the expectation that they don't have to be too worried about the law even in the United States. This
Yeah.
belief that they're all partners and ideological siblings, and therefore we will have the same kind of protections, around law that is supposed to regulate us as we enjoy in India. I mean, I think that sort of is suggestive, what you said and the timing. But go on, Biplop, please.
Yeah, yeah. No, I agree about what you said. And like, because even with them ticking no at the foreign entity box, which we spoke about earlier in the registration, which they did, I must say we spoke to one of the foremost experts on foreign influence and foreign lobbying in the United States. His name is Ben Freeman. He is from the Quincy Institute, um, and he's a complete expert at this. And he told us that this is clearly, just unquestionably, that RSS is a foreign entity as far as the Lobbying Disclosure Act is concerned. And he looked at all the documents. We sent him all the documents. He's looked at it, and that's what he has to say. And multiple experts, and he's not the only one. We have like two other experts on foreign lobbying and lobbying influence. All of them have said the same thing to us. So 100%. Now, another thing that I wanted to mention here, and another component which is not in a report, but which is something that we have seen in our own reporting from the United States, is about the question of what you said about Israel, right? About how the RSS was born, like, or had ideological inspirations from the Nazi Germany, and the movement there in Italy around that same time, and the fact that now they find a great ally, that ideological sort of umbrella, find great allies in uh, Israel. Uh, in summer this year, there was a Hindutva speaker. Her name is Kajal Shingala. She's better known as Kajal Hindustani. In June and July, she had come to the United States, and she was invited by multiple, and she was invited and hosted by multiple Hindu uh, groups in the United States. And all these groups, they recognize as Hindu groups, Indian groups, Hindu Indian groups primarily. And all these groups have some or the other connections with Sangh Parivar groups. Because what we saw in the events that were hosted, where she was the main speaker, and there were community members in various parts of the country. Like in New York, I attended the New York event. I went there and I reported from there. In New Jersey, it happened. In North Carolina, it happened. In Texas, multiple cities in Texas, it happened. Across the country, there were multiple, probably like around more than 10 states she visited in the United States. And the Vishwa Hindu Parishad of America was one of the organizers of multiple events that they had, where they had hosted Kajal Hindustani. Kajal Hindustani was arrested in October in 2023. She was arrested in India in Gujarat by the Gujarat police, and for hate speech. And she's known to be extremely anti-Muslim, like in hate speech. And even here at the event in New York where I visited, she called the now mayor-elect of New York City, Zohran Mamdani. She called him a jihadi zombie, and she called him a rakshas, and she called him a rakshas after saying that Ram Rajya तभी आएगा जब राक्षसों का हम अंत कर पाएंगे. And then he said that इधर भी एक राक्षस पैदा हुआ है, उसका नाम है जोरान ममदानी, वो जिहादी zombie. And this is like stuff that she said here. And a big component of her speech was and this is a really fascinating part of that speech. She tried to tell Indian Americans here, or Hindu Indian Americans who were a part of the audience, and there were hundreds of people there, that you are not doing enough to influence US politics. And the way she framed that was, आप इजराइल को देखिए या Jewish लोगों को देखिए. You look at Israel or you look at the Jewish community and how they are influencing US politics. And you look at how when Israel bombs Iran, US has to go and partake in that war. But it's not the same when India has a confrontation with Pakistan. In fact, what we saw was the opposite in many ways. Like, we saw that, the United States ended up becoming a better partner with Pakistan than with India. Like, and then she asked the question. Then she also says, look at the Jewish people. They are also very wealthy. They have politics, or they have filled the political establishment in the United States. And then she asked these Hindu uh, members, Indian American Hindu people in the audience, how many political leaders have you produced? How many political leaders have you been able to supply to the United States political establishment? And I mean, it's also particularly interesting that this was happening literally 2 weeks after a Indian American, ethnically Indian American, person was won the primary, and except that he's Muslim and not a Hindu. But this is very interesting because have spoken to multiple Jewish New Yorkers here, people from Jewish people who are from New York, who have shared this anecdote with, like, who has shared this, this speech that Karl Schlinger says, and all of them talk about how this is also deeply anti-Semitic. This is actually, profiling Jewish people in a very certain light, in like stereotypes that have been used against them by Christian nationalists for hundreds of years. So I find that envy, but also the fact that envy comes from a sense that you have a common shared hatred against another community. Yeah.
No, I think Biplop, again, I think in this conversation is supplying many reasons, uh, both for trying to refurbish their image without, while actually deepening their practice, at the same time trying to refurbish their image. But the other part that we were trying to say about trying to influence Indo-US relations, something that you said just, I mean, what you described now seems to be a very compelling kind of understanding of why they have to intervene and for what. And using Zionist politics as a kind of model, which Hindutva should also uh, learn from. I think that this is what I'm hearing from you.
And I mean,
Also,
to answer, sorry, no,
sorry, sir.
go
And
ahead, go ahead.
also erasing, like you don't, like you're trying to claim that every Jew uh, supports Netanyahu's policies, almost by definition, which is a complete falsehood and an insult to a large segment of the Jewish population. Likewise, I think you're also assuming that every Hindu is radicalized into Hindutva, which is a great insult to a large segment of the Hindu population. Uh, Please go ahead, Meghnad.
Yeah, no, so what I was saying is that you asked, I mean, a great question, the last one, because it was very profound, right? You were saying that does the RSS need to sort of whitewash its image because the RSS is in power in India, it's making sort of merry. It's like why does it care, or why would it does it even want to change it into the sanitized image? I think that's a great question, but I think if you look at the sort of pro-Israel movement in the US, you'll see a parallel there in the sense that just because um, you are in power doesn't mean you don't want to orient your image in a certain way. You want to gain more socio-political capital, more legitimacy for what you do. And that legitimacy can still be better achieved if you can say that, oh no, we are this great Hindu organization that does tons of social service, social work. We're a volunteer-based organization where we sort of focus on everything from our physical health to assisting in flood relief and earthquake relief, and you present that sort of picture, and that we've been unfairly maligned by these anti-India or say jihadist forces, the kind of language that is common in the Hindu rights lexicon, that is still powerful, and that is still important, and that is still potent. And that doesn't mean that the anti-Muslim politics in India has to stop in any way, but you create this cover for it, you create this justification, this legitimacy for it, which can prove useful not just today, but tomorrow and in the near and distant future as well, right? And so that sort of project, I mean, one of the things that the RSS gets due credit for, as it should, if you look at it extremely sort of like objectively, the RSS is an organization that has played an excellent long game, right? And so we must look at the last 100 years for evidence of just how well they play this long game. And that long game would therefore include projects that may start on January 16th, 2025, but could be thinking of the next 10 years or the next 20 years or the next 30 years. And for that project, for that legitimacy, it could be definitely beneficial to create further legitimacy from, especially in quarters which have historically not provided that kind of legitimacy or cover to the the Hindu nationalist movement in the way that it's provided to the Jewish nationalist movement in Israel. And again, this is not to say that all Jews support Israel. We have, Biplob and I both have several Jewish friends and people we report on who are deeply critical of how Israel sort of dehumanizes Palestinians and keeps them as sort of second class residents in occupied Palestine. But it is to say that it is a very sort of persuasive or convincing model if you can spend enough resources and enough human power to sort of put that point across. And this very well could be the start of that next journey for the next, I don't want to say it, but maybe 100 years.
Yeah, I just wanted to make one point in addition to what Meghnad said. We also have to remember that the Indian government itself has lobbyists operating in Washington, D.C. There are and multiple lobbyists in Washington, D.C. who represent the Indian government hired by the Embassy of India. There's a group called SHW Partners who on whom the Indian government has spent taxpayer money in millions of dollars. To represent India in Washington, D.C. And there is another firm called Mercury Public Affairs, which was hired right around the time the tariffs had taken place against India, the 50% tariffs, which was also hired by the Indian government here. So, and
That
RSS's lobbying, yeah,
is taxpayer money, as you're saying.
yes, it is taxpayer money,
But it's
yes, 100%.
important. I mean,
Yeah,
but it is important because look, every government is lobbying the United States, right? And
yeah.
I mean, as a government, you cannot not lobby the US. The sort of questions are, why is an organization of individuals, as the RSS has referred to itself as, or a group of individuals, I beg your pardon, why is this group of individuals lobbying the United States
Yeah.
Congress?
I am looking at the clock somewhat reluctantly because I think it's such a fascinating conversation, and I do want to compliment both of you, Meghnad and Biplop. I think your the understanding your understanding of the complexity with which this organization operates is quite profound, I feel. And so I did want to, but I wanted to ask and end with an even more complicated question. We are living, I mean, 2025 is also a moment in the journey of humankind where I observe that more and more people around the world are choosing leaders uh, very similar to the politics of Donald Trump and Mr. Modi. which is centered around hate against some of the most vulnerable minorities. That becomes the center of your politics. And there's also a huge closeness to big business. There's a complete decline in the civility of public discourse. There is an impatience with democratic institutions, and I would say a huge fall in what I call public compassion. So briefly, I'm seeing, and it's not about those leaders, but it's about more and more people being drawn to these leaders. So, and I think the BJP RSS sees itself very much as part of this global movement. And there are clear conversations about, Mr. Modi recently was called upon to write the introduction to Melanie's memoirs, which I found quite fascinating, and so there is a sense of an alliance, an ideological alliance of what we call the far right. I think it's a complicated term, and I don't know, with its, we have to, and populism is an even more, inadequate word to describe this movement. So I'm saying that the complication to me is that to be part of this global move, let us say to the very far right, you don't have to change your image. You have to even deepen your image in the politics that you actually aspire for. So isn't there a contradiction then in the nature of lobbying that we see happening? I mean, this is again speculative and a difficult question, but I just thought I'd lobby it to you guys because you got a lot of insight.
Could you repeat the last part of your question?
The last part, my what I'm saying is that you saw reasons for looking at the next generation or and so on, for the RSS to try to present a more liberal, humane sort of face to the world. But I'm saying at the same time, when we are seeing this resurgence of this politics of hateful targeting of vulnerable minorities and everything that comes with it, and the RSS also sees itself as a very proud leader of that trend. Why would it want to whitewash its politics?
Yeah, no. I mean, I think again, like I said, it's a great question. The I think there's a way to sell your case, to make your case
Mhm.
as the rightful victim, even if you are the undeniable oppressor.
Mhm.
If politics can be seen as a game of optics, right? There's a way to spin anything. And it's important that that spin is often done in India with the help of crores of rupees and ads in the US and elsewhere with the help of millions of dollars and efforts such as lobbying and influence operations, right? And the point is, can you, even as you engage in historic rates of anti Muslim politics and policies and violence and discrimination, both legalized and sort of under the radar, both constitutional, I mean, constitutional in the sense that not outlawed by the state or not outlawed by the judiciary, and
It's more and more. In fact, I'm seeing that we've already moved to a place where you don't even need the lynch mob. The state will do
yeah,
the business. And
yeah.
so at the one hand you're going there, on the other hand you're trying to whitewash.
Yeah, so both I mean sort of constitutional, legal and extra constitutional, judicial and extrajudicial, all of that. But you still want to employ the lexicon of the victim, of the oppressed, of the rightful, the Goliath, but you want to present yourself as the David. And one of the best ways we see this is you look at sort of progressives in the United States push to create anti-caste legislation, right? Sort of making caste a protected category to ensure that people don't get discriminated on the basis of caste in the United States. And you have the Hindu far right come up and say that's Hindu phobic.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
have Zoran Mamdani criticize Narendra Modi over his role in the 2002 Gujarat riots, and you see Zoran Mamdani being called Hindu phobic, let alone that his mother was raised in a Hindu family and all of that, let alone all of that. You still have the Hindu right calling him Hindu phobic. So you want to be able to employ the language of the oppressed while being the oppressor yourself, and that language that can be done through coming to power as the BJP has done in 2014 and twice since then. It can also be done in places where you're not in power by employing public relations strategies and mechanisms, part of which is lobbying. And you spoke about the right sort of coalescing together. Earlier this year, I was at the conservative a conference known as CPAC, which is the full form of CPAC is Conservative Political Action Conference. And there I saw the Argentinian head of state, Milei, making a speech. The Italian prime minister joined virtually and made a speech. Donald Trump was there in person making a speech. And there were Jan 6th pardoned rioters standing next to me who'd just been pardoned by the president, who were there sort of roaring and egging him on as he spoke. And there's a former UK Prime Minister, Liz Truss, who was there, who made a speech. There was Steve Bannon, former Trump advisor, who literally raised a Nazi salute at that conference and still went on to give interviews and do shows for the remainder of the 2 days for the next 2 days of the conference. You saw this coalescing of the far right, but you didn't see um, an RSS leader or a Hindu far right leader there, right? So there is still space in that theater for the Hindu far right to engage. And recently, there was this thing which I might be getting the name slightly wrong, but it was something called like the American Jewish Hindu Congress, something on those lines. What it was a coalition of extremely sort of right wing pro Israel figures and right wing Hindutva or Hindu far right figures, right? And so these groups want to find common cause. There might be contradictions of convenience that you mentioned, Biplop mentioned. There are contradictions of convenience. How is a Hindu far right movement that was spawned by people who drew inspiration from a man who killed 6 million Jews, standing next to a group that whose faith sort of suffered at the hands of that same fascist leader in Germany, right? So there are those contradictions of convenience, but there are still those opportunities for those coalitions to be formed. And to my mind, one of the things that is the most sort of concerning in this rise of the right and this naked sort of display of their politics is, like you're saying, that maybe the mask can come off, maybe the hood can come off. But even as that hood comes off, you still want to be saying that you're justified in doing that. You still want to be saying, no, 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 I'm actually the victim. I'm the one who's having to do this in self defense. I'm the one whose culture is being taken away from me. And for all of those reasons, dollars, public relations, advertising, and political control are super helpful. They've got part of that in India. They're achieving, or they're hoping maybe to get part of that in the United States.
You're absolutely right. Hindu khatre mein hai, although you control, the caste Hindu controls everything and yet says that they are in danger. Biplop, fascinating conversation. I want to give you the last word, both to respond to what I said and anything else that you want to sum up.
No, I mean, I feel like what Meghnad just said summed up the whole situation with regards to the lobbying and RSS getting involved in that very clearly. I just wanted to ask what you asked right initially to the question to which Meghnad responded, that why are they whitewashing at a time when it seems like the right wing movements across the world are doubling down? Uh, this
Doubling up,
process
doubling,
of white,
yeah.
sorry,
Doubling up, I would say, whatever. I mean, it's a moment of triumphalism for the far right across the
yeah.
world.
Yeah, and I feel like this process of trying to get the validation of certain groups across the world at a world stage is the process of also doubling down on your hatred, right? It's the process of so that you can do more by getting this validation, by being part of this club, you can get the license to do even more. Here in India and everywhere else in the world that you can. So I feel like this has to be seen in the context of that as well. That it is precisely in their aspiration for more in a certain sense hatred, more kind of anti-Muslim rhetoric that they want to achieve this. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it is. I mean, the RSS has had a remarkable journey of the last 100 years, from having not taken part in the freedom struggle, from an ideology that was responsible for the assassination of Mahatma Gandhi, from going into the shadows of public life to now, the dominant apex position that they have. Uh, and I think it is this, this ability to deal with and live with contradictions, where kind of doublespeak is part of your public engagement. So they do want to be heroes of the hate politics of what we are calling the far right, and yet they want to be embraced by the liberal center left as well. And I think possibly it is dealing with these complex, seemingly impossible to reconcile aspirations that we can understand. The extraordinary lobbying effort that you have exposed. I mean, I also just didn't have time for it. It also reflects the fact that they have a lot of money, you know,
Whose
to
money is
invest.
it? Because
Whatever,
do they have a
yeah.
bank account?
Yeah, but they don't.
Are they
And
registered?
whatever,
Do they have a
yeah.
bank account?
They don't have a
Also,
bank.
whatever happened to the Swadeshi, sort of efforts of the RSS, which was very, something that they were very proud of, and which, like, also swayed many people towards them, the Swadeshi movement that they sort of, wore as a badge of, they were very proud of for decades. Yeah. Yeah.
Akash Patel actually has written in a recent book on Hindutva, actually said that Hindutva is not an ideology. Why he argues is that, you can believe in Swadeshi at the one end, you can believe in crony capitalism at the other, and still remain RSS. So he says RSS is simply a project of hate targeting Muslims and Christians. I mean, that is what defines it, and everything else is negotiable in this journey, and that's uh, part of the complexity of how it has engaged with the world and its and reached this position of power. I wanted to end by saying I really learned a lot from this conversation. I enjoyed it. I really want to congratulate both Meghnad and Biplop. Just being somewhat older than you, I think the kind of courageous investigative journalism, we're seeing too little of it. And I think you all are holding up a great example of courageous, ethical, and also professionally very sort of uh, advanced kind of journalism, which has allowed us to understand yet a new aspect of the journey of the RSS. So thank you for it, and I hope that I'm sure your article is going to lead to many repercussions in terms of statement strategies and some impact on you folks. So we'll be watching you closely and wishing you the very best. Thank you.
Thank you, Harsha. I just want to say one final thing, that our project would not have been possible had it not been for our wonderful editors at Prism, including Rashmi Kumar, who did a wonderful job as the lead editor, but really the whole team at Prism. And the other
Yeah.
thing, it would be amiss
You
to like
need
not say
you need those platforms, absolutely, and
absolutely.
those are becoming more rare. Yeah, go ahead, please.
And it would be sort of like I would feel bad had I if I had not pointed this out. We mentioned Dr. King at the beginning of this chat. The other photograph that's on your screen is from my birthplace. I mean, is of a man from my hometown of Kolkata. So it's sort of like it's very touching for me to see a picture of Rabindranath Tagore from my hometown and where I'm from, and a picture of Dr. Martin Luther King, who is sort of forever associated with Memphis, where I work. And it in many ways is reflective of the story that we've done, also that Biplop and I have done, also, which spans these two countries and which spans the time frame in which both Tagore and Dr. King lived.
And since you mentioned Tagore, let's sort of affirm his imagination of the country he wanted to see, where the mind is without fear, where the head is held high, where knowledge is free, where the world has not been broken up into narrow domestic walls. May you in your lifetimes see that world reclaimed. So thank you very much.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you, Harsh. That was very. Thank you.
ये दाग दाग उजाला ये शब गजीदा सहर वो इंतजार था जिसका ये वो सहर तो नहीं